Welcome to the podcast, which is all about the world of marketing on television through TV shopping networks, infomercials, and commercials. Are we on the air? I'm your host, Sean Wilsey, and for over 30 years, I've hosted shows on cable shopping networks, generating hundreds of millions of dollars in sales, and now I want to be your guide into this world, explaining how it works, why it works, what doesn't work, and introduce you to the people who are making it the success that it is today. We are adding one thing to that list, which I've been promising since we started this in August: TV shopping networks, infomercials, commercials, and the world of timepieces. Yes, we're finally getting around to the long-anticipated discussion of fine watches, or timepieces, as I like to prefer to say, when I can say it. I make a difference. I think there's a difference between a wristwatch and the world of watches and the world of timepieces. Timepieces are things you have appraised. They have value, complications, fancy watch movements. A wristwatch, anything about a fashion look. Didn't spend a lot of money. It's just that I consider a watch. And the two each have their place on television, and frankly, as a lifelong watch collector and lover, I wish there was more in the way of timepieces on TV. But I'm kind of getting off topic a little bit here. The real reason why this show is happening in the time frame that it is an article I just stumbled upon last night. That a very well-written article. In fact, I'm dying to get the author of this article on the show, because it's very well written and he seems to really know his stuff. But anyway, that's another topic. The reason, and I forgot where I was going with this thought, was selling watches on television, how this all connects, because the article is written about Invicta Watches, which obviously, when you think of watches on TV today, that's what you think of, and that's probably the only thing that you think of, and it wasn't that way 1997, 1998, because that's when selling watches on television started. When I get Tim Temple on the show, I'll let him really go into that, because he was there. I was kind of the background guy to all of it. We were both working at Value Vision at the time, which became Shop NBC. And Shop NBC, remember, as I've said on a previous show, has always been, now Shop HQ, they're the gimbals. I've always, for decades, made the comparison. The world of TV shopping networks, QVC, HSN, Shop, whatever you want to call them, HQ, NBC. It's Macy's, Bloomingdale's, gimbals. And I was saying this 20 years ago. New York City used to have Macy's, Bloomingdale's, gimbals. There wasn't room for all three. Gimbals slowly went away. Now, the thing I didn't predict was Macy's now owns Bloomingdale's and QVC now owns HSN. So where does Shop HQ fit into all of this? Because they're trying to be gimbals to QVC's, Macy's, and HSN's Bloomingdale's, which is a tough position to be in. Well, Invicta is kind of what's doing that for them now. But again, go back to 1997, 1998, and it was a very different world. There was no Invicta on Value Vision. Tim Temple and I didn't sell an Invicta until the early 2000s. Ironically, I bought my first Invicta in the mid-1990s from a guy by the name of Danny Blair on a completely different shopping network, but that's a whole nother story. But it started selling vintage watches, believe it or not. We used to do a show called Boomer Time, and we had this guest on, and I apologize, I can't remember his name. I think he's no longer with us. His company still exists, but he would come on, and we would sell one-of-a-kind, two-of-a-kind, actual vintage watches. This was in the overnights when we had the smaller audience. Then a guy by the name of Jeff Hess, who is still around and is still selling watches on eBay, he brought in one-of-a-kind, two-of-a-kind, vintage watches. And so as a watch geek, which I've always been since I was a kid, this was really exciting for me and for Tim Temple. From there, it expanded into new product. A gentleman by the name of Lior Ben Schmel, who was running at the time Swiss Watch International, SWI Group. He was bringing in gray market, high-end designer watches, Concord, Corum, Baume & Mercier. I mean, real high-end product. and a legitimate product. It was acquired gray market, which is, again, a whole nother story for a whole nother day, which is why I'm finally getting around to this podcast, taking on some of these episodes, which, again, you're not a big fan, we'll be back next time with another episode. But I hope you'll listen, because I think you'll learn something about the world of TV shopping through all of this. So Lior, again, late 90s, early 2000s, was bringing in these high-end watches. And this, I had never owned a Concorde in my life until this guy made it possible. He was bringing Cartier. It was really an amazing thing. Gray market dried up early 2000s. And so that's when we were relying on in-house brands that our vendors were creating. And Invicta happened to be up and coming back then. So I think we were Shop NBC by then. It was 2001. We started this relationship with A.L. Lalo, president of Invicta Watch Group, who at the time was a very small company. And it took off. And it exploded. Now, to the point where, and again, nothing I'm saying here isn't public knowledge, A.L. Lalo sits on the board of directors for iMedia, which is the owner of Shop HQ. So if you're wondering, why do I see so many Invicta shows on Shop HQ, therein lies your answer. Because the owner of Invicta is on the board of directors for the company that owns Shop HQ. So it's obviously to his benefit to have a lot of Invictas there. Will that ever change? I don't know. About a year ago, I had a conversation, let's just say, with a watch vendor, fairly well known. He was debating, did he want to come on Shop LC with me, or did he want to go back to Minneapolis with what was going on up there? And he made the decision. I said, hey, I was honest in my opinion. I said, hey, okay, good luck to you. Good luck finding airtime, because I think you're going to have a tough time doing it. Well, it's been a year. He still hasn't been on air there. Put the piece of the puzzle together. So anyway, stumbled upon this article last night, GearPatrol.com, Zen Love. The guy gets points just for the name. I got to get this guy in the show. I'm really a fan of his writing. He writes a very well-balanced article about Invicta. And so this is the debut of our new feature called Wrist Check. Hey, Orson Welles, what do you think of the name Wrist Check? I think he likes it. Okay, thank you. Sit back there and drink your Parmesan and listen in. So here's how the article goes. The article, by the way, very current. What's the date? January 6, 2022. For many of today's watch collectors and enthusiasts, Invicta watches simply aren't a part of the conversation. They represent what these communities sometimes refer to as fashion watches, in quotes, meaning they're produced as mere accessories for consumers that don't have a special interest in or knowledge of watches. And then for Invicta makes particularly brash ones. Again, I'm going to stop a lot as I'm reading this just to comment, because he makes some excellent points. And this is a debate that went back to when I was selling Invicta on Shop NBC over a decade ago now. There were watch forums. And by the way, I have completely given up on all watch forums. I haven't been a part of one in a decade. I swear 3 times a week I get somebody on Facebook who sends me a request to join another Facebook watch group, because now Facebook is I decline every one. I appreciate it if you send me one, but I'm not joining any. They inevitably turn into a bunch of infighting and arguments, and they're not fun. So, but that was one of the debates that was had 20 years ago in watch forums and is had today. Is Invicta really a brand, or are they just fashion watches? Are they just producing something for the fashion market? Well, they're producing 4-figure pieces for the fashion market, if that's what it is. But again, I'm not here to have that debate, but that's what he writes about, and I agree there's a point to be made there. I'm wearing, and by the way, on my Instagram, I'm starting to post more watch of the day. I'm wearing a Gucci watch. This is a 4-figure timepiece. It's all Swiss made, has sapphire crystal. It's just that if I'm going to spend that kind of money on a watch, I'm going to expect those kind of things. So, and resale value as well. That's something now I look for. As I've liquidated most of my watch collection, most of my Invictas, they're gone. And there's not, to be fair, a huge resale market for those watches. You're not going to buy one of those expecting to resell it down the road for a lot more money. There are exceptions. I have an original Subaqua Noma 3. That is worth something, but that is one of the rare exceptions to the rule. Most don't hold their value, which is why they have their program now on Shop HQ where you can sell back your watches for a percentage of what you paid for it. There's not a big resale for these. In a quote-unquote timepiece, I would say you're looking for some resale value, possibly down the road, or at least holding its own value. Anyway, continuing, typically as bold in size as in the use of, he's using fancy words, as in the use of iterative elements and wildly unrestrained designs, do Invicta watches deserve your attention. Though their modern watches are indeed soul-shriveling monstrosities, just my opinion. That's his opinion. It's worth revisiting Invicta for a couple of reasons. First, whether snobby collectors like it or not, Invicta has a significant presence in the wider world of watch shoppers. And he's right. There's someone who, again, has admitted he's not a big fan, but they do have a significant presence in the wider world of watch shoppers. They're no longer just an on-television brand. Invicta has a retail presence. They're found around the world. They are featured on television shopping networks around the world. So they're global. You got to give it to them. A lot of the quote-unquote TV brands in this country never make it globally. Invicta's done that. So for those who might be drawn to Invicta, there's a chance for them to be exposed to what some would call real quote-unquote watches. Second, many opinionated aficionados, again, quote-unquote, who in turn their nose up simply at the name, perhaps don't know that there's more to the brand's history than its modern image. Here's where the article gets very interesting. As is the case with many of the world's most prestigious watchmakers, Invicta's roots go back to the 19th century and the heart of Swiss watchmaking country. Specifically, it was founded by Raphael Picard in 1873. Right up until the quartz crisis that put Invicta and many other historic brands out of business, it made everything from complicated pocket watches to elegant calendar and chronograph watches. For watch nerds who can see past the name and its modern associations, vintage models might present some good value and unexpected history. And he's right. Some of the vintage models that you can find on eBay, they do sell for a fairly nice premium. I do find some of the vintage models very interesting, extremely interesting. So again, if you just go to eBay, in fact, let's try this right now live, and let's just search vintage Invicta, and, well, nothing is coming up. I have a Hamilton. Isn't that interesting? I have an Omega. I have a Rolex. I have a Tag Heuer. This is all coming up when I search vintage Invicta, because there are 0 results for vintage Invicta. So they do not come up that often. They are out there. They are out there, but they do not come up that often. At this moment, as we're recording this, there are none on eBay. Invicta remained a family-run brand for much of its history until its financial troubles, and the name changed hands a couple times. The once Swiss company is now American-owned and headquartered in Florida, part of the Invicta Watch Group, which also owns historic Glycine. This sounds like a story of many watch companies, except that the name is now on the dial of some of the most popular and polarizing watches on the planet. 2 great points. 1, the fact that they own other brands is so common now. I wish more watch aficionados were aware of this fact, or watch collectors, that many of these legendary timepieces, and now I'm potentially using the word timepieces, many of these legendary timepieces are all under one umbrella. It's not like it used to be, where you used to have all of the individual watch brands. Now, there are still a lot of them, but for instance, Swatch. We all know Swatch in the 1980s, right? Fashion brand, still out there, makes beautiful Swatch watches. I'm a collector. I love them. Swatch, parent company, Swatch Group, owns Harry Winston, Rado, Hamilton, which I'm a huge fan of, Omega, Tissot, Ballman, Union, Breguet, among others, and obviously Swatch. So there's been so much consolidation in the world of timepieces that honestly it's no longer fair to really judge Invicta because, well, they own these other brands too, because there are people that do that. They say, yeah, it's not just Invicta. They own Techno Marine, for instance, and all the... there's some very legendary Swiss brands that are all under one umbrella, so it's not necessarily fair for some of those that are snobbish against Invicta. Not that this author is by any means saying this, but there are people that do say, yeah, they're not just Invicta, yeah. And your point is, continuing, many people love their Invictas and have perhaps discovered a deeper interest in watches through them, but what other options do Invicta fans have? If you're drawn to Invicta watches for their loud baller looks, there are a range of options worth checking out, from affordable G-Shocks to luxury Breitling and high-end Hublot watches. If you don't have the budget for a Rolex Submariner that the Invicta Pro Diver is based on, consider these excellent alternatives that offer some of the same appeal. And they list a sampling of some other watch brands that Invicta fans might dig. And again, an excellent point, because there are other brands out there. So, okay, fine. You don't want to join the Invicta cult, and I've heard that term used. I don't think it's fair, obviously. Then, yes, there are some other watch brands that you can look into. G-Shock might be more to your style. Seiko does some amazing bigger timepieces, but yet they also do things that appeal to me. So there's a lot of outside brands that might be worth looking into. Again, do some homework. I will say this. My brother-in-law, my father-in-law could not be less interested in television shopping and what I do for a living. They could not be less interested in listening to 2 words of this podcast. But when they found out that I've sold Invictas and I own Invictas, wow, did their eyes get real big. And even though they're from Puerto Rico and speak Spanish, believe me, there was an English conversation to be had about Invicta watches, no problem at all. So they have an appeal. But yet, conversely, for whatever reason, they have their haters. They have their detractors. I was going to read it, and I'm not going to, frankly, give them the attention there. Someone wrote another article after I read this one. And again, the guy's name, great writer, Zen Love, writes for Gear Patrol. And he's got, if you're interested in timepieces, I got to get this guy in the show. I have to. He's got some great articles about the best French watch brands, 5 of the best perpetually glowing tritium watches. The fact he even knows what tritium is. I'm in love with this guy. 10 watches we hope to see in 2022. The complete buying guide to Bulova watches, brand I'm a big fan of. So check him out. And again, I hope I can get him on the show someday. But anyway, totally off topic. In fact, I forgot. I've gone off topic so many times I forgot what we were even talking about. Oh, the fact that someone else had written a very biased article about Shaquille O'Neal getting involved with Invicta. And again, love or hate the man. Great businessman. Brilliant businessman. I so admire Shaquille O'Neal as a businessman. He has lent his name to Invicta watches. Yes, they're the size of hockey pucks. Yes, that's what the customer wants. I don't want that, so I'm not necessarily an Invicta customer anymore. If they ever started doing 42-millimeter case diameter watches, great, I'm going to be on board, but the big watches just weren't my thing. I called it a trend 10 years ago. What do I know? They're still out there. So what is the future of watches on television? And again, this is a conversation that hopefully someday Tim Temple and I will have. Jim Skelton, who kind of followed in Tim's shoes, I want to get on here at some point. Here's my thought on this subject. Yes, there is a future selling watches on TV, and I mean all watch brands. It is going to take a dedicated watch network to do it. I mentioned earlier Lior. He, in the early 2010s, started up an all-timepiece network. It was called World of Watches. We had a brief song and dance. In 2011, when I started actively looking for new employment, he was one of the companies, I've never told this story, that I had a song and dance with. I flew down there to Florida, in Hollywood where they were, walked through the facilities. We discussed money and everything. We had a handshake deal, and then there were some changes possibly in the business that got me a little nervous, and so I backed out of the deal, which again, we parted on good terms. And it worked out better for me anyways. But until someone starts up an all-watch network, it's going to be difficult because you have QVC and HSN that have each tried. They've tried to build watch programs, and they've failed miserably. They don't have the men watching. And it takes time to build that audience. We talked about this with Steve Bryant on a previous episode. Go back and find it. And I don't think they're going to dedicate that time to it. You have Shop LC, the network, again, full disclosure, that I work for. We've tried, same brick wall. Don't have the male audience. And because you can still find coin shows on television, on dedicated, purchased airtime, but still on television, dedicated shows to coins. So the market is still there. Men will still watch. Shop HQ tried their Bulldog format. Again, opinion on my part, totally went about it the wrong way. Terrible execution. Just botched. I remember watching the first day thinking, they're botching all of this. It's just wrong way to do it. So that didn't work. You need a dedicated timepiece network, and somewhere there's someone that will do it, that will start it up, even if it's just 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. It doesn't have to be 24/7. It could be 3 dedicated hours in prime time. Don't do it in the daytime hours. Men aren't going to watch. It needs to be prime time or Sunday afternoons. Men will watch. I'm giving away all my free business advice. So someone take this, because there is money to be made. I firmly believe in that. But until someone does that, it's going to be Shop HQ and Invicta as the only game in town when it comes to timepieces. That's just, or the internet. You can still go online and shop, and frankly, maybe that's all guys care about these days now, and maybe the TV shopping network is going the way of the horse and buggy. I don't know. Time will tell that, but I still think there is a male customer, especially my age and up, who will buy from television a dedicated watch show to the world of watches. And speaking of timepieces, I am doing Watch of the Day on Instagram. I'm trying. I have the attention span of a gnat. And so I've done, 3 this week, I guess. I just, as before I've gone into the studio today, did one. And so you can check those out. Orson Welles, what'd you think of my last Instagram Watch of the Day? Oh, I think he liked it. Okay. I'm telling you. If you're wondering why that's funny, go back, previous show. I just love that bit. Oh, may he rest in peace. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Favorable reviews, too. Boy, I do appreciate those. But I don't want you to miss a show, so subscribe on any of the podcast apps. Plus, you can listen to the archive of past shows. 38 shows now, previous to this. I hope you'll check me out on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Sean Wilsey, and on Instagram at SWilsey. Thank you for downloading this edition of Are We on the Air? This has been a King Bobby production.
Yes, I know, Travis. That's why we give such bargains.